If you want to travel to unknown places and not take a step, then what you need to do is flip through the pages. If you believe in something like this, then this show is just for you. The Moon Market presents the book show in association with Harper. Okay, one sec. I've got some breaking news for you. Well, that's exactly what my author has said several times. Well, my guest today is someone who is very interesting. She started off her career in this sales and advertisement business. She sold soaps, shampoos, detergents. Then she took the mic and camera, went on to reporting, journalism. She reported several crime cases. And then she decided she's going to take the pen. Now, you must be imagining a journalist writing a book. It'll be something very sensational. But turns out to be that this book, amongst her several ones, is so sensible and so special. Every single book of hers is like a slice of life, presenting a very interesting chapter with so much of baggage, so much of excess baggage. On the book show today, Richa S Mukherjee. Hi Richa, how are you?
Hi Rajiv, good morning. I'm great.
Good morning. You're looking very fresh and all set to be, completely questioned. But knowing you as a journalist, I would not be surprised if you question me more and I question you less.
I'll try to contain myself.
I've done some homework, but I'm sure you've done some more homework, Richa. So let's see how this goes on. But first of all, congratulations. One more mega success. This is really some heavy baggage you're carrying with you. Success over success over success. This one's a beauty. I read this book and excess baggage is a beauty.
Thank you so much, Rajiv. It's strange to be starting a conversation carrying excess baggage, but I think this is the kind of excess baggage which is the pleasurable kind because honestly, Rajiv, I don't consider myself prescient enough to have assumed when I was writing that book that it will be released at a time when I would be seeking the very things that I've written in this book. It's such an unnerving and unstable time and disconcerting time for all of us that the fact that there is a little bit of travel, it's about family relationships when, all of us are in each other's faces all the time. It's about letting go. It's about coping. It's about dealing with, decisions that we've made in our lives. And there's a lot of humor. So I think, this was my small unintentional gift during this time to just infuse this book with everything I was sorely missing myself. So I really hope it makes people smile.
It has. In fact, I received the book with that, that baggage that you put onto your bag. Yeah, the tag. It was very cute. It was very nicely done. I wish I could travel, but I traveled through your book. And I must say this journey was brilliant. So, Richa, when I read this book, when I pick up a book when I believe it's going to change my life or give me a new thought. When I received this book, I was like, okay, this talks about a girl as a friend, as a working woman, talks about a wife, talks about a daughter, talks about a journey, not just on the outside, but also on the inside. It's an inward journey as well, where you discover so much more about yourself. So many avatars of a woman put into one. This could have been made into 10 different books, but very smartly and without a force, you put this all together and taught us the simplest beauty of life, which is understanding yourself and valuing relationships. That's what you came out to. The message is so clear and so wonderfully set out there. How did you come up with this? Is it like, one day I have so many problems, or is it like, how do you come up with such a thing?
So, Raji, when it comes to writing humor, firstly, I think my decision to write humor, I think that is the common thread, whether I'm writing thrillers or whether I'm writing contemporary fiction or family dramas. I think every decision I've ever made in terms of writing has been a very organic one. I have been brought up in a household. I call it a clan, not a family, because I have 3 elder sisters. And for us, it was a very industrial upbringing. You get to the table, you'll get the food. If you don't make it, out, So, and my father was in the government service. So we were traveling all over India. So my solace was books and writing my very unfortunate sounding poetry. So I never even dreamed of becoming a writer. I was too busy. I think, I've always called myself a wanderer of sorts. And I think the writer in me was marinating. by changing through the time that I was changing. Rajiv, imagine I've changed 7 schools. How, I mean, for a poor little girl, that's a little much for anyone, right?
Were you sent out of school or did you leave that school?
No. So I have a very hard time convincing people that I wasn't a bad child. I was a good girl with good grades and very well behaved. I was never hardly ever punished, but it was because my father was always, moving cities, and, we had to move along with him. But much as I was complaining about it at that point in time, I think it somewhere helped me gain my perspective on the world. And because there was so much upheaval and change, the only constant I found was possibly training a humorous lens in the world, right? What does humor do? It helps make the world palatable. It helps, us understand the complexities and make our peace with that. So I think that is something that helped me develop this lens. And then, of course, I was a voracious reader. So I started reading a lot of books. And, then this is what I think somehow, I don't know, channelized the writer in me. But the writer in me was born much, much later, at a time when I was in my maternity break. As far as my current book is concerned, all of these decisions, Rajiv, were very organic and situational at the moment. When I was writing the crime, I didn't want to turn the tide and write, oh, come on, there's no crime, no humor crime in India, let's write one. It wasn't that. I just thought at that point in time, I felt I needed to write a story, and I was led by the story. As far as excess baggage was concerned, yes, there's a lot of messages in it. But again, Rajiv, I think it came from a very organic space where I remember having this conversation with a friend who's just gone through a divorce. Not that that is the central theme. That is one of the themes and one of the issues I've spoken about. But I was, and also I've seen somebody very close to me in my family go through this. And I was absolutely amazed by not what the person or the friend or the family member was having to deal with in terms of, treating it as a life stage, an unfortunate life stage, which somehow you can move along with. But it was about dealing with everybody else's reactions and how it was treated like a stigma. And somewhere at the back of my head, I knew that my character formation started happening around this matter. But then, of course, I thought of who best to present the story and the characters, and then all the multiple layers in terms of Sindhis, the partition, travel, all of that somehow got coated in the humor. And where I did, but this was one place, Rajiv, where I really wanted to balance it out, because I was talking about a lot of issues. But humor is about balance. It's not about offending. It's about, writing enough to make people think and smile, but not offending them. So I was saying,
so that's a very thin line. That's a very thin line, Richa. When the first book that you took or you wrote, which is I Didn't Expect to Be Expecting, that talks. That's a very nice tale. It's from your point of view that speaks about pregnancy and the difficulties, challenges, love, and phases of bringing up a child. Now, this could have offended people as well. You do not make fun about something that is so serious, prayed for, worshipped for, and is God's gift, if that is how people react to it. So did you have that fear? Now, as a journalist, firstly, with that word comes a great amount of responsibility, authority as well, and you're answerable to people, right? So did you ever think, I shouldn't be ruffling feathers, so I've written something, it might hurt them, let me take it back? Because in today's day, that's a big thing.
No, absolutely, I've had to do that. I think I think a lot of what I write and a lot of what people write comes from who they are and how they process information. So to me, I think as a way of life, moderation is key. I don't think my parents ever sat me down and told me, listen, don't get overexcited. I've had a very, very normal upbringing, right? And clearly my house, there were too many things happening. But I tend to view everything in that moderation, and which is why when I'm writing, I think my advertising career has also helped me in that stead, because I was not in creative. I was in account management, where I was constantly having to deal with the circus of people around me. And it's a very creative, subjective space where on one side you're balancing the business expectations, and on the other you have people dressed in, these baggies and smoking up and sitting and saying, okay, I don't want to do this, So essentially, I think I think that really taught me how to, manage a lot of expectations and be in multiple shoes.
Who checks this, Richa? I mean, see, this is your point of view, but you're being read, Richa, by a lot of people with different mindsets, correct? In Tier A, Tier B, Tier C cities, people with different upbringing, people with different perceptions of life. So who decides which is that limit? Do you have someone, example, your husband, who reads this and says, this is crossing the line a bit, or the publisher, HarperCollins, who does that?
So when you're having the conversations, when you're listening to people's stories, I think some of the credibility checks and the data checks and, authenticity checks happen along the way when you're writing. And secondly, after it's all done, the first person who suffers is my husband, always.
Okay.
And whether he likes it or not, he keeps a day job. And the rest of the time, it's me. Because whether I'm writing a story, whether I'm writing an opinion, whether it's an interview, I just go to him and say, just check this, right? So he knows he has another job which he's not paid for. And
so he definitely has excess baggage. He's the one carrying the excess baggage.
Lots. And I don't know if he'll be very appreciative of me telling you this, but after 3 books, he comes up to me, and I always, in my acknowledgements and dedications, I always give a large mention to him. But he came to me this once and said, darling, with all the unpaid work that I'm putting in, not one book has been dedicated to me. When am I getting it? Even my daughter has got one. So I said, I promise the next one will be for you. Out of all the 3 sisters, of course, this is again a ground for fiction, because I sent it to only one of my sisters during the, pre-publication process, because I think, again, she's very objective and she's very articulate in terms of telling me. And then maximum, there will be not 1 or 2 beta readers who will give me an opinion from another point of view. Then, of course, there's my publishers. So between all these voices and filters, I hope that, I'm able to say the right thing without offending anyone.
Fair enough. Perfectly said. So now, as we move on, there are a few things I'd like to talk about you. I mean, your books talk about different things, and there's humor in everything. There's beauty of life and magic in every story that you say, and puts a smile. So we talk about that. But let's get back to those days of journalism. I must say you're a lucky one to leave journalism in today's world, because it seems very, very different. So according to you, the times that you were a journalist, the nation wants to know, the nation wants to know. Tell me, how was it? What is the role of a journalist then? And how do you look at media and journalism today?
So, honestly speaking, Rajiv, around the time when I was a journalist, firstly, I was covering soft business stories, and I was covering crime. And at some point in time, I was covering entertainment. And I think I was also anchoring. And I think my producers had told me at that point in time that I was looking too large on screen. So then I stopped anchoring.
Maybe they said you are larger than life. Maybe they meant that.
Really. It made me think of the Friends comment from Chandler, Monica, when she says, I look, the camera makes me put on. Like, how many cameras are on? So, unfortunately, I'm a victim of that. So, so at that point in time, I was, I had stars in my eyes. I had just come out of journalism. And I was still formulating my opinion on what was going around me. So there used to be a newsroom. We used to discuss. So we weren't part of, because, we're just new recruits. So we weren't part of a whole lot of the editorial discussions. But what we knew was whatever we were covering, whether it's crime, whether it's business, we were diligently doing our work. I think what has changed, Rajiv, the world we live in, and I don't think journalists are any different. They are people, essentially, right? So what is happening is that there is so much of unease and cynicism and such an excessive number of opinions that we have suddenly formulated about this world around us, where there's so many things going on, that somehow it percolates down to even the people who are sitting in those chairs. At one point in time where I could open the paper in the morning, get my bit of the news, and there used to be one editorial section in the middle, which was about op-eds and opinions, right? Now, it just seems that everything is laced. Now, of course, I'm not vilifying everybody in journalism, and there's a lot of objective voices as well. But it's just that I think as an entire population, it's easy enough to say, maybe it's an oversimplification, but I think we just need to dial things down.
Do you think over the past 10 years, news or media is changed for the better or for the worse? Straightforward answer.
I think it has changed. Honestly,
I know. That's not my question. It has changed for the better or the worse. It's changed, I know too.
I don't want to intellectualize, Rajiv, and I don't think I am in that position where I can, because honestly speaking, I don't want to sound correct, but on a daily basis, I am changing my own opinions, It is all a function of reach and access. because there is so much of access, a lot of people are filtering back their opinions, which there wasn't an avenue of earlier. And because there's so much reach, the people in the powers that, sitting in those chairs are thinking they wield that much of influence. So, there's a lot of, there's a lot of exchange that's happening. So, which is
Very
why,
well said.
honestly, which is why I really think that I am changeable and impressionable even at this age. So I can only imagine, what I try to do in my sphere of influence.
At the age of 25, it's no problem.
Well, thank you. This is turning out to be a better interview.
Right. So, I think you defined it beautifully, not just as someone who's within the industry, who was within the industry, but also as the consumer of news, for your sanity and for your allowance of judgment and thought process. I think you defined that beautifully. But as you say as well, the news is so filled with negativity. Sometimes you need a person with a breeze of fresh air, with a smile, positivity, and goodness to come in. And you have ensured that every book of yours, no matter what genre you take, has this good vibe about it. Let's focus on your latest book as well, Excess Baggage. Now, tell me, what is the feedback that you got, and what is the message that an author is trying to convey? Richa S Mukherjee, as an author, what do you stand for? To make people smile, to influence and make them value relationships. At the end, when you hold that pen or when you type those words, you're trying to tell the world something, right? That's what you want. So what does Richa stand for?
So I don't want to be presumptuous in my influence on the world and what influence I might wield, but I love the simplicity with which one of my absolutely favorite authors, P.G. Wodehouse, who I've read all my life, he said, irrespective of how he was vilified and ridiculed through his life, because at that, he wrote in the context of the world was unfolding, and there was so much upheaval and unrest around. But all he chose to say throughout his life was, "I want to make people happy." And he was a humorist in every sense of the word, right? In a similar sense, I might be oversimplifying, but I just want to make people smile, and I want to make them think. It is not the kind of vacuous smile, which is a slapstick smile, which just makes you go, ha, 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 laugh out loud kind of smile. I want to leave people with a good, gooey feeling in their hearts and a little bit of an afterthought, which helps them process as well as entertain themselves while reading my book. So if you ask about excess baggage, like I said, a lot of times when we are talking later, we think back and want to sound intellectual and say, what was I thinking at that point in time? Nothing. Because, a lot of stuff is impulsive when you're writing it, and it forms as you go. It takes form as you go. But if I were to talk about a uniform theme here, Rajiv, I would have to say that there is a certain, yes, it's humor, but there's a certain bleakness, and I'll tell you what it is. There is something incomplete and imperfect about every single character that I've written about. Whether it's a 67-year-old Smita Punjabi who's trying to still, make her peace with the partition and trying to balance between modernity and, what her past was. Whether it's Anviksha who's trying to be the right, make the right decisions, and she's very confident, but she has this conundrum in her, in her own personal life when it comes to her mother. Or if it's, it's all the characters, including Bhindi and Mutton the dogs, who I've incidentally named after food. And my husband said, you think so much about food that you write them as characters into your books. So I think there is such an impetus on all of us. And I think, I don't know where it's come from, but we all want to portray this perfect life, with, which is round and perfect and, the right picture. And I'm not just talking about social media. We all just want to be perfect, but we aren't. Who defines perfection? Who defines normal? So I think the one message I wanted to get across is whether you're a student who's not scoring well enough, whether you're a parent who's trying to do their best, but, keeps on getting opinions, whether you're a person trying to do the best at your workplace, or you're trying to look for love. Nobody defines what perfect is, what normal is, what happiness is, except you.
Exactly. You know what I liked about this one? Excess Baggage, like we said, covers different avatars or the roles that a woman plays. Now, one thing that I loved about this book is you don't create situations out of the world. These are all day-to-day situations that we face. But you put a smile and make us realize that those situations that we take for granted are actually wonderful. You can sit back and smile at what happens, and what we call a routine is fun as well. You can smile at that every single day, which is what you capture so beautifully. So, as an author, Once you write the book, it's yours. You distribute it to your family, your close confidants, and the publisher, HarperCollins in this case, as you said. But at the end of it, once it's delivered, it's given to the hands of the readers, and you are filled with compliments or criticism. As an Indian author, there is this thing that, at least that's what a lot of people believe, that there is a lot more to be desired from Indian authors. I do not know why the impression for international bestsellers are a lot more. Do you feel this thing that as an Indian author, I'm not being given my due? And talk to me about the compliments and the criticism you have faced through your journey as an author, be it this book or the other ones as well.
So there is a trend that I have noticed, and I'll tell you from an evolution point of view. Even if I were to look at my own reading journey, the exposure I have had was, I on one hand was my father, who used to read the scriptures to me, and on the other hand, he gave me a whole set of adventures of Huckleberry Finn and Jules Verne's and Panchatantra, and also it was a mixed bag, right? So
you're a big fan of the Mahabharata. You're a big fan of the Mahabharata. Huge. I know that.
Yeah. Now we know which direction to point. So, it was a whole mixed bag of influences. And I think that goes a long way in, channelizing the kind of reader in you. Off late, and I think that stands true for most Indian homes where, the parents read a certain thing and, friends read a certain thing. And then in the end, you understood what you want to read. And
Correct.
Growing up, I have seen that on the bookshelves, there were a lot more international titles for sure. But that does not mean that people would not read. And, we tend to think that just because international titles are visible, that doesn't mean that regional literature is not there. It has always been there. We had born and brought up on it. But it's just that the reach is not the same. Because obviously the publishers were firstly, getting a lot of these international titles home. And people were getting exposed to that. As and when the industry opened up, that is when we, started getting access to more Indian writers. And then there are some Indian writers who opened the door for fiction in a way that changed the future for all of us. Be it Amit, be it Amit Tripathi, be it Chetan Bhagat, no matter how much people want to vilify him, Preeti Shenoy, Ravinder Singh, Ashwin Sanghi, you name all of them. And these are the kind of people who open the doors for.
I'm glad you mentioned all of them. I'm glad you mentioned all of them, because these are all fantastic authors with a brilliant point of view, influence a lot of mindsets and people's thought process. Absolutely.
What tends to happen with humor is a double whammy, not just being an Indian author. I think people trivialize humor writing. And this is one of the panels I was on actually day before.
It's the hardest genre. It's the hardest genre because you can't make everyone find the same thing funny. If you're making a group of people laugh at something, you've connected with a lot of people, and that's difficult.
Absolutely. So I think people find an more obvious and immediate connect through pathos and catharsis and tears and all of that, which I think is a very basic and reachable emotion, which is fine. But I think I take great umbrage when people say that, it's easier for humor writers, because it's not. Every kind of writing, and not just humor, it is exacting. It cannot be trivialized, because it has to strike the right balance, and it has to, without even letting you understand the intention, it has to hook you and make you smile and make you think. So I think it's hard. But I honestly think that there's so much rich literature in our own country that as long as you're not saying that, I will not read anything outside my country, and as long as you're saying I will read everything inside my country as well, that's perfect. Then that is the right balance, because you don't want to be a frog in a well, right? I will only read my own country's work. No. I mean, that's what the beauty of writing is. You can be everywhere at the same time from one chair.
You be at the same spot, but still you reach everywhere. That's the beauty.
Absolutely.
Do you think, Richa, we live in a world where we require social acclamation. We want people to like, follow, and see what we're all up to. How do we make book reading a lot more cooler? Because back in the 80s and 90s, reading books was a thing, right? They don't teach you in school. They teach you how to read, but they don't teach you the importance of reading books in school. So how do we actually make a lot of people, no one will say that reading books is a waste of time. We all know how important it is. But to ensure that people devote time to reading books, how do you think we can implement this? Is it by making it sound a lot more cooler, by incentivizing people and telling them how important it is, or education needs to not just how to read a book, but you will have to read a book because this is the benefit it has?
As a mother, I can tell you that from the time that my child was 6 months old and she didn't even know what a book was, I've been exposing her to books ever since. And one thing I promised myself I wouldn't do, which I realized I started doing, was started picking books for her all the time, right? So, like, this is not age appropriate, ye padho, like this, right? But it happens to a certain age, you have to, because they go and pick up Charles Dickens at the age of, when they're a toddler, it won't work, right? So I did that. But as she grew, I understand she had an affinity. And the point is, you can't tell children to do anything, Rajiv. If you want the next generation to do, you have to do yourself. Emulation is key for children. And those inculcation of habits will happen only if they see it around themselves. I doubt you can pick one parent who can tell me or convince me that we were never readers, but look at our children. Wah, kitna padhte hain. Right? So I think it has to be inculcated at home to begin with. As far as the school is concerned, I think all schools try to inculcate the habit. But what tends to happen is, because it's part of the curriculum and there's a whole bunch of things the schools have to cover anyway, it does get sidelined. So I don't think they have... what I've started seeing schools doing is, they get authors to school. Not when your teacher's saying the same thing, maybe it might not have the same impact, but they get people to visit. They're doing book clubs in schools for younger children, for older age groups. For older people, I think there's these, for publishers are also trying their best, they're doing a lot of these, there's this whole community of bookstagrammers. I think they really help because, they read and they review and they put the reviews out there. So engaging with them, book clubs, incentivizing, of course, there's a lot of that. But I also think, Rajiv, one reality of the times is that there is so much noise and there is so much distraction. I mean, I look at my nephews at 16, 17 years of age. They used to write stories for me, which I've got pinned up, on my walls. And now all they can think of is PUBG and friends and posing and Instagram and filters and stories and reels. I can't get a conversation through, right? So I don't know. I don't have the answers. It's just that it has to happen as a combined effort from everywhere. Imagine, I had no idea I was ever going to publish with, either a Black Ink books with a Ravinder Singh's outfit or a Harper Collins. It was a dream. It was an unattainable dream for me, right? So I remember the first time I heard about it, I cried and I shrieked and I jumped for 15 minutes. And to know that there are publishers, because...
That's a good workout. That's a lovely workout.
That's basically where after my journalism days, I lost weight because I jumped so much when I started jumping up and down.
Yeah, so please go on.
The point is that they allowed me because, there are very formidable titles in the HarperCollins, pantheon of titles, right? Yeah. And when I started thinking about contemporary fiction and humor, I was appalled. I said, I felt small thinking that, how is it that they're going to let me publish something like this or Black Ink books. And the fact that they took a chance on me when I wrote humor, the fact that I wrote a humorous thriller, which nobody, at the time when I came out, nobody's writing it. Now everybody seems to be writing it, to a time where it's just a simple story about a mother and a daughter, and still they've given it a platform, right? So there are people, for every book that comes out, there are about 10, 15 people who are believing in the story and you. Absolutely. And then when I get emails like, you were asking earlier about reactions. There was this gentleman who wrote into me from I forget which city. And he wrote the email and he said, I read your book. I didn't expect to be expecting. And, in your head, you think, why will a guy ever read that book? Yeah, exactly. So he wrote to me saying that I have, my wife and I are childless. And we read that book of yours, and it almost like we took that journey with you, and thank you so much. I had tears in my eyes, it's just about access. And when Kanpur Khufia Private Limited came out, one of my biggest reservations was I'm using some colloquial terms. It's about Kanpur. I don't have a glossary of terms. What if somebody doesn't understand me? Because my husband's German boss was like, ye burba kya hota hai? And I'm just like, okay, he's not going to understand what the hell that is. Absolutely. So this couple from Amsterdam wrote to me. Those emails are just my lifeline, right? And they said that we had never been to India. We picked this up at the airport, and it so beautifully helped us understand at least a part of your culture. So those are the kind of gratification and validation. And I'm just happy people are, like you said, publishers are, helping, enabling it, and then people are accepting it. So,
you know much better, and you're in a much better position to answer this. But success for an author is not the number of copies printed alone. It's not the number of copies sold. It's not the number of books they release, but it's the superpower about a book or any source of communication is how many people actually consume that and affected by that. And if that is any way of judging success, then you're a mega success. Because I know you influence people without forcing it down. You offer a plate and they just grab onto it. So that is what Richa is all about. Richa, last few questions before I let you go. How much of Anviksha, how much of Tara, which is the character and I didn't expect to be expecting, is actually Richa? How much of that? How much do you? Because I never understand this word of fiction. There's nothing called fiction. It's semi-fiction or it's a reality, because in every fiction there is a slice of the author, right? So tell me, how much of you is there in both these characters?
So I think I have to by habit. I have to have a multiple personality disorder. I don't have an option. So I dip into so I dip into my characters, as and when I need to. I think there was honestly more of me in the first book, because as you all know, the first venture is always a more autobiographical one. But I obviously had to deny that when my mother-in-law turned around and asked me, "Is that mother-in-law me?" So I said, "No, not at all."
Way. It comes in the fiction category.
Yeah, I said that is purely fiction. So yeah, so there are bits and pieces of me all over.
Sure.
But because I need to wear many shoes, I become a 67-year-old person sometimes. I become a child sometimes. I become a dog sometimes. So yeah, it just
wow. I mean,
depends.
wow. Okay, of course, you've made this detective character as well, which is very interesting. And I know how fond you are of horrors. Now, I can't wait for a movie or for actually a book, which might be converted into a movie later on, because that's the trend that you are heading on. Tell me, is your next going to be a horror comedy? Because I don't remember the name. The Japanese names are quite difficult. There's a Japanese author who writes a lot of horror, but brings in so much of comedy. I forget his name at the moment. I apologize for that. But is your next somewhere around what you love, which is horror, and bringing in humor, which is what you ace?
So I have been warned by many people that never speak of your forthcoming books, but unfortunately I have verbal diarrhea and I keep speaking of them. So I will go ahead and tell you now that my next installment, which is Kanpur Khufia Private Limited Part 2.
Oh, wow, lovely.
So which
Mr. Tripathi is back.
Yes.
Mr. Tripathi is back.
And the Matt Tripathis are back. And unfortunately, I'm trying to finish it, but it's not getting quite finished. I'm almost at the last draft. That has has paranormal elements as well. So there is a little bit of humor and there's the paranormal as well. So hopefully I'm at least doing an experiment. Let's see how it works.
There was supposed to be a book dedicated to your husband. Don't forget that one.
I will not. The one with elements of horror will have it dedicated to himself. There'll be a mixed message there.
I'll understand it when I see it for sure. Okay, Richa, thank you so much. But last but not the least, people who love what you write, people who are influenced by what you say, write, and believe in, how can they reach out to you? And one final message why they should be actually grabbing a copy of Excess Baggage.
I'll reverse the order. So why you should grab Excess Baggage is, I think in a nutshell, what Excess Baggage to me is, it's a story about hope and second chances, quoted in laughter and wanderlust. For me, that has always been a line, a summation of what Excess Baggage stands for. So I think it'll help you laugh, it'll help you think, and it'll make the times we live in a little more palatable. So I hope you read it. And I am a very accessible author. You can write into me. My email ID is in my book. So you can reach out to me on Twitter and Insta. And I'm the helpful auntie. So yeah, I'll respond.
The 25-year young
25-year-old helpful auntie, yes.
Somewhere during the show, we said the nation wants to know. But I will have to tell you, the nation has to know what you have to offer. You've been wonderful, Richa. I want this word of your talent, your words, your thought, and the way you intend to make people smile through every line, between every line, is nothing short of magical. Thank you so much.
So much.
It was a pleasure connecting. Thank you.